Hello, everyone. This is Lupe Munoz,
And I'm Steve McKeon.
and this is the Leadership Exchange. This is episode 8, where we will be talking about the importance of coaching in the workplace. I think, Steve, the first thing we should probably do to get this ball rolling is really define coaching for everyone. You want to take a stab at it, or do you want me to take a stab at it first?
Yeah, Lupe, let me start kind of with general bit of information in terms of, how I see coaching in the workplace and, some of the differences between coaching styles. But, when you think about coaching and the areas that we're focused on, it's really about developing a team member, a new leader within the spirit of a high performance work team, right? We're trying to find ways to leverage their strengths, skills, interests, and have that dialogue with them as to, what it is that they want to do and where they think they can contribute. And so, just from the pure standpoint of the relationship there, it's providing a level of support and continuity that helps the individual advance and move along. And it's not punitive in any way, or it should not be punitive in any way, and it's for the better of the team. Lupe, why don't you go ahead and give us your thoughts there?
Coaching to me is the way I would describe it is it's a process by which you're helping someone. In this case, we're going to talk about another leader, a developing leader. You really have them in mind. They're the center of your focus when you're coaching, and you're really trying to understand what it is that you need to do to help them. And before you can coach effectively, at least, there's a few things I feel that are super critical. And the first one being the person needs to want the help. If they're not if they're not wanting it, they're not asking for it, then it's going to be really hard for you to affect change. I'd say that's probably the first thing. And then number two, and we talked about this or in a previous episode, is you really have to have trust established, and it's got to be pretty strong because, I think of back at some of the coaches I've had in my professional life or when I was going through sports or even in my military past, some of those leaders that served as coaches, because you can be a leader, you can be my boss, but not necessarily my coach. I think that's a really special place you can be for someone because of the trust that you have to establish.
Yeah, and I think there's another component that you and I talked about before we went to recording here, and that's really how the communication goes in that environment. So you've set the environment where the coaching is going to take place. You make sure that the individual that will be receiving the coaching is open to it, right? And there's different ways to do that. And then it's really establishing the communication pathways that are critical for the feedback, but also just the plan moving forward. And I think the one thing that you and I are in agreement is that it's not just constant feedback, right? We're not there to give feedback in many areas that the individual is working. What we're really looking to do is to focus on the things that we've agreed that the individual wants to advance, right? So in some cases, it's areas that they're really good at already and they want to take it to the next level, or it's areas that they want to work on because they feel that it's important for them to develop those skills. And through that process, the communication back and forth between coach and individual being coached is going to be really critical, and it's got to be 360, right? It can't just be one way feedback of information. Share a little bit there, Lupe, on the feedbacks. I know that's something that really is important to you, and how that feedback's given to a team member or somebody that we're developing as a leader.
A lot of people make that mistake, and I would tell you that in my past, I made the same mistake around confusing feedback with coaching. Feedback's valuable, but the intention of feedback's a little different than coaching. So if I'm coaching someone, I'm really trying to help them with their opportunity. They've come to me, they've asked, hey, I really want to improve this. And then I start to really use a Socratic method by asking questions and trying to find out why do they feel this way? What are the things that they see? So I'm really focused on them, and I'm really focused on the here and now. feedback's different. At least in my book, it's focused around. And I saw an opportunity. Let's say someone showed up late to a meeting, and it was a very important meeting, and there were a lot of very important people there, and that person needs to understand that that can be an impact to how people perceive you if you're showing up late to all the meetings. And so I may talk to that person and say, can I give you some feedback? And I'm hoping they're going to say yes. They usually do. And I said, this lateness to the meetings can potentially affect how people perceive you. And so I want to make sure that you understand that that is not necessarily the most professional thing to do, and not necessarily putting a positive image on your brand. But going to what you were talking about, Steve, communication is super critical. As a matter of fact, I shared a little statistic with you that 86% of employees and executives say that communication issues are the top reason for coaching failures. Our ability to be effective listeners is super critical when it comes to communication, and being able to have the communication around active listening, around restating what you believe someone has told you, and making sure that you are framing things up for people as you're receiving it so that you can get that sort of reinforcement from them that, yes, what I just interpreted you telling me was correct. And I think that sometimes we're so busy trying to give that feedback and give our opinion of how things should be, when we're really trying to, I think in a coaching situation, we're really trying to get people to reflect and trying to open their minds and trying to really help them sort of self-medicate with our guidance.
Yeah, those are key points, Lupe. And, I think as leaders, anytime we take the opportunity to sit down with employees and talk openly with them, it really starts to build that trust that you're talking about there. That's so important. And, as we do that more and more, then the opportunity for feedback, both, positive and maybe feedback where we're pointing out something that they may need to consider or act differently, comes into play. And without that, relationship or confidence that they have in receiving that feedback, because it's comes in a goodwill, right, can really either make or break the deal, and keep the culture of positivity going, and then just the trust that's needed. I think the other area is we're looking at, new leaders within organizations, is teaching them to develop problem solving skills. And you've talked about a couple examples on earlier podcasts. And I think one of the areas that's really important when we start thinking about coaching a new leader in an organization and really helping them develop problem solving skills is that know that they are going to fail potentially at certain times, and you have to be okay with that to really be a good coach, because that's how they're going to learn. Otherwise, you're just giving them all the answers and doing the work for them. So I like what you said a minute ago, Lupe, about the Socratic method, and just asking questions, helping them develop their thoughts and ideas to go after that problem or to go after that activity that they want to address. And, the more we can give opportunities like that and do it in the spirit of a coaching environment, the stronger teams are going to become. The new leader that's growing will gain more confidence in their ability to find solutions themselves to critical things that maybe weeks before they weren't comfortable making the call on. So it's really key to be prepared to understand that they may not get it right all the time, but letting them practice getting it right, coaching them through those opportunities, really is going to advance their own capabilities. And it happens in a much quicker time frame when you give them that opportunity and you're willing to let them fail.
Steve, I don't know if you've had some of these coaches. I imagine you would. I think most people have somewhere in their background have had some of those just teachers, athletic coaches, even on a professional level, those individuals that just were real influential in our lives, not just our career, but truly our lives. Like, you learned life lessons from these individuals. And one of my stories had to do with a coach that I had for football in high school. he was an amazing individual because, yeah, he understood football, but what I thought made him really amazing was that he understood human beings. He understood some of the things that you just described, that sometimes you got to let the quarterback, sometimes you got to let the running back or the defensive lineman try something on their own, and not to chastise them for failing, but to really ask the things of them so that they can reflect on, okay, what did you learn from that experience? So the play didn't go the way you thought. What would you do different? Why do you think it didn't go the way you thought it would? And then they get something out of it, because even a good athletic coach should be trying to make you a better person, not just a better football player, right? So when you're at work and you're a leader, you're trying to build other leaders. You are not just trying to get them to be better managers, right? We talked about the manager versus leadership aspect. That's the business. Does that mean that you don't do that? No, it means you can do that, but understand that there's a bigger scope here around, how do I add to this person's life in a positive way? How do I make them a better human being? Because, no matter what your industry is, what your profession is, if you're leading, you are in the business of people. And so as a coach, I feel like that's where the focus should be, is how do I help them be the best person that they can be and that they want to be. Not what I want them to be, but what they want professionally to be in their current role.
And then helping that new leader understand that early on in the relationship, as you start the coaching with that individual, really kind of sets the stage, creates that environment for the trust where they know that you're going to be giving them opportunities to try things. And the expectation is that, hey, sometimes you're going to get it right and sometimes you're not. And that's okay, because we're going to talk about each case. We're going to talk about it when you get it right, and we're going to talk about it when it doesn't go right, because that's part of that whole learning cycle and building the trust and the feedback. And then likewise, I think as a coach, learning to listen as well to that individual that you're coaching, so that you really are listening to maybe what it is they're struggling to break through, or something that they're trying to overcome. Because a lot of times we can rush to kind of a finished state, or where we see that they're going and they're really hung up on something. So if we just stop for a minute, kind of listen, get that feedback from them now as to, okay, that didn't go well or that did go well, what can we improve on? Again, really fosters that trust and relationship, but also really develops some deep problem solving skill sets as that individual starts to learn to articulate and communicate the challenges that they're seeing. And I think that goes a long way to developing these new leaders in organizations.
Yeah, you nailed it, Steve. Listening's the number one skill that you have to master when you're coaching. In a coaching setting, the person that does the most talking is the coachee, or the person being coached. In a feedback situation, it could be that the person giving the feedback may be talking the most, but it's probably going to be more like a 50-50 split. If I'm teaching something, if I'm teaching someone a new process, then chances are I'm going to do most of the talking at first, at least. And then as things progress and they start to pick things up, then I may start to ask some open-ended questions that will make the discussion a little more 50-50. But if you are in the coaching mindset, you are going to be asking questions, but listening a lot more than talking. So that's a really great point to make, because a lot of times we feel like, hey, the more I talk, the better I'm coaching. And that's actually the opposite.
If we think back to our career, and the individuals that have had those really positive marks on what we've been able to do, and you took it back to times in early life where we were coached in athletics. And I'll just give you an example of a story, though, within the work environment early in my career. And that at that point, I would say I was hesitant to ask for help. And I felt like the organization had trusted me and had promoted me into a manager position, and therefore, I should know everything I need to know to be successful and deliver, the goals and objectives that we were required to achieve. And I had a new boss come in, and it was interesting because, as you mentioned, the ability for him just to listen to me and ask those key questions. So I had to reflect a little bit deeper. He just didn't sign off on one little answer to the question. It was always a question followed with the next question, followed with the next question. And in a couple situations, he got me down to where I didn't have the answer. And that's really kind of what he was trying to do, is just to let me know that, hey, you're not always going to have all the answers, and that's okay. And so he would work me down to a point where I would get almost flustered and say, okay, well, I'll have to get back to you on that. And then before I could walk out of the meeting, he would say, hey, wait, let's talk about that first, because I got 3 things or 4 things I want you to think about before you go out and try to get me those answers. And then he'd lay out some conditions or some areas of additional reflection. And through that process, it took me about 6 months working with him to really understand what he was doing was setting me up for success by really helping me think deeper and then start to develop confidence that when I didn't know the answer to any specific question, I would go to him in advance and say, hey, can we sit down and talk about something? Here's kind of what I'm thinking. Here's the situation or the issue. Any thoughts on your end that we might want to explore? And anyway, there's that relationship really was eye opening for me, and I was fortunate to have him early on in my career to kind of set that
I
stage.
want to make a very important point to everybody that's listening, that is a leader, is if you do not have a coach right now, and you're a leader in, in any setting, you need to get a coach. It doesn't mean you have to go and find someone to pay, professional coach, a life coach. That's not necessary. What is necessary, though, is that you have that person. Now, I've been very, very fortunate that I have people like you, Steve. You mentioned how you and I have coached each other. You got to have that network of people that you have that trust, and you have the shared values that you can share things that frustrate you, things that you're challenged with, things that you don't know where to go with. And good coach like Steve will ask me questions that'll make me reflect, and all of a sudden I find myself going down a path that I didn't even know existed because of some of the questions. And so your ability to have someone like that in your professional life is very important. It doesn't matter whether you're an early leader, a new leader, or if you've been around the block for a while. You've got to be able to find that we all can get better, and we all could use the help when it comes to coaching.
Agree 100%. That is key. And yeah, I feel fortunate as well, Lupe. Obviously, you're a peer coach of mine that provides a lot of reflection for me as I'm looking at different problems. And as you mentioned, within our networks, we've been able to align other individuals that are kind of that same peer coach. And through those interactions, we get better. So I agree 100%. Find those coaches, identify them, and even look outside your network too, because I think one of the other things that I find interesting is just the opportunity to meet other people in life, and especially individuals that are following a similar maybe career path or industry path, and just developing some relationship with those individuals so that you learn new things. And I think for any new leader, remember that you're just starting your career in this area, and that you get better over time by continuing to learn. And that's part of that process. So good coaches are key to that, and then just those experiences that other individuals have that you can leverage and kind of learn from as well. So I think, Lupe, the last thing that as we get close to our time limit here, that I wanted to bring up is the bad coaching experiences that are out there, that you want to really understand what it is when coaching doesn't go well. And just a couple examples of that is that if you're coaching an individual and you're providing guidance and giving them feedback. And then you immediately take that information that you shared with that individual and the feedback maybe that they've given you, some of their challenges, and then you openly share that with others that really have no business learning, right? Or no
Yeah,
business.
that's a train wreck. That's a train wreck, Steve.
Yeah, and you see it again in the work environment, and sometimes intentional and a lot of times not intentional. But you can just imagine that any of that gets back to the individual you're trying to help develop, it is a train wreck. The other one is trying to compensate for some of the areas that that individual is not either has the skills or has developed those skills yet, and then upselling them within the organization, because you tend to put that person into a position by upselling them to others in the organization, and they're just not there yet. And so I think that's the other caution that I would have as you're when you're out there coaching individuals is really keep it between you and that individual, both the upsell and then the challenges that that individual may have, because it's really going to show when they can perform and do the job that you're helping them grow into. And that's all that needs to be said at that point, right? Because now they're demonstrating the things that are needed. So again, watch the upsell and definitely the oversharing of information that needs to stay between you and the person you're coaching.
It's a terrible way to establish trust when you're talking about the things that there's this individual sharing with you during it's working completely against you. That covers coaching, and hopefully everyone understands that it's a super critical part of being a leader and helping develop a team, especially a team of leaders. Please find that coach for yourself, become that coach for those people around you, and try to make sure that you're coming from a good place and have trust established before you decide you want to try and become a coach to someone. For all those listeners that want to give us some feedback, please, we appreciate all the feedback received so far. You can find us on Instagram and on Threads. The name is the Leadership Exchange Podcast. That pretty much wraps us up for today. Steve, it's been a pleasure. It always is. For now, this is Lupe Munoz.
And I'm Steve McKeon, and this is the Leadership Exchange.
Everyone have a great day.